Hello, and welcome to the SCRI Relevance Review Panel Orientation webinar. We really appreciate you agreeing to help with this critical part of the SCRI review process and for taking the time to join the webinar. We know that some of you have reviewed for us before, but it's always good to review some of the key elements in the process. Here's an outline of what we're going to cover today. We'll look at the legislative background for SCRI. We'll talk about NIFA policy on confidentiality and then conflict of interest. We'll go through the review process. We'll talk about the outcomes, and then we'll ask for questions. But before we kick off on the agenda, I wanted to show you who will be involved in the relevance review on our end. These people are here to help you in any way that you need. Also, some of the information that you will be sent is automatically generated by our various systems. We know from previous experience that many of your companies employ spam filters that screen out automatically generated email. So please let your systems know that emails from these people can be trusted. So let's look at the legislative authority for SCRI, which was first authorized in the 2008 Farm Bill and then reauthorized in the 2014 Farm Bill. Congress provided $80 million in mandatory funding, which is important since it means that SCRI is not dependent on the appropriations process. For the years 2014 through 2018, $25 million of the 80 is reserved for the Citrus Disease Research and Extension Program. This was done in response to the HLB epidemic, which is still threatening significant segments of the citrus industry. In addition to the funding, the Farm Bill mandates that NIFA consult with the Specialty Crop Committee of the National Research, Economics, Education, and Extension Advisory Board in a formal process that provides input to NIFA on ways to improve the SCRI program. And the Farm Bill also establishes a two-part review process for SCRI. A relevance review to be conducted by industry representatives, and a scientific merit review that is conducted by experts from industry, academia, and government. Now we're going to cover NIFA policies on confidentiality. Confidentiality is one of the cornerstones of the NIFA application review process. We adhere to these policies very tightly so that applicants to our programs can be assured that their efforts are not co-opted for other purposes. First, all materials submitted in either a pre-app or a full application are considered to be intellectual property. As a reviewer, you are privy to this intellectual property, but you should not share it with anyone who is not part of the process. Nor should you use any of the content for any purpose whatsoever. Secondly, the identity of reviewers is not public information. We've actually had legal opinion that reviewer identities is not covered by the Freedom of Information Act. I will never reveal to anyone the identity of anybody on a panel. I've had people say to me, "Oh, so-and-so told me that they reviewed for one of your panels." To which I reply, "Oh, really?" This is still America, so if you want to tell others that you've been a reviewer, that's certainly your right. But please, do not reveal the identity of any of the other reviewers to anyone else. Please remember that the nature and content of the deliberations is strictly confidential. We maintain this so that our reviewers are comfortable giving us their honest assessments without fear of their opinions becoming known to others. You may have colleagues at work who know that you are a relevance reviewer, and they may ask you what went on during the panel. Tell them that if they want to find out, they can volunteer to be a reviewer. Give them my contact information and I'll be glad to add them to our database. One of the downsides to telling others that you were a reviewer is that it opens you up for questions, some of which can be awkward. For example, someone might say to you, "Well, I know so-and-so submitted a pre-app that wasn't invited to submit a full application. What happened in that panel?" You would have to tell them to have the applicant read the reviewer comments and to contact me. Under no circumstances should you reveal anything about what happened during the panel. Also remember that discussions or information sharing with other reviewers is only permitted within the panel meeting itself. This is for two reasons. First, it prevents anyone not on the panel from inadvertently overhearing your discussion. And secondly, it ensures that all panelists have access to everyone's opinions. Conflict of interest is also a cornerstone of the NIFA review process. NIFA is responsible for ensuring that public funds are used for the best purpose possible. Expectations for impartiality and fairness are extremely high. One way that we are certain to meet those expectations is to avoid even the perception of a conflict of interest. Here are some things that are a conflict of interest. We know that many of our relevance reviewers have advanced degrees, so if there is a project in which the reviewer's former graduate school advisor or an advisee is an active member, that would be a conflict of interest. We also know that many of our relevance reviewers are active scientists, so projects on which the reviewer has an active role in one or more objectives is also a conflict. Other COIs are projects on which the reviewer has provided funding to the team on related work, projects on which the reviewer will serve as an advisory panel member and will receive direct financial compensation, projects submitted by an institution at which the reviewer holds an adjunct position or a similar position such as a part-time lecturer. Here are some things considered not to be a conflict of interest. Projects for which the reviewer has provided a letter of support. Projects on which the reviewer will serve as an advisory panel member if the project is funded but will not receive direct financial compensation. Projects on which a commodity organization to which the reviewer belongs has provided funding to the project team for related work. And then projects on which a member of the reviewer's graduate committee is an active member. Applicants are required to submit a form on which they list people with whom they may have a conflict of interest. We check the pre-apps against the names of the reviewers assigned to each of them to determine if a COI exists. Sometimes we might miss something. If you're reviewing a pre-app and you think you might have a conflict of interest, contact program staff to make sure that it's actually a conflict of interest. It's best to do that via email since we're often not at our desks. If we determine that it is a conflict of interest, simply do not review that pre-app and indicate in PRS that you had a conflict of interest. Also, do not participate during the panel discussion of that project. The next series of slides attempts to describe the review process. Reviews are submitted online using our peer review system, or PRS. Each reviewer will rate assigned applications individually. When you log into PRS, you'll see a list of the pre-apps that are assigned to you. There will be evaluation criteria and a scoring matrix, and you will also be able to add constructive comments about each of the projects. PRS requires a username and password. If you have reviewed previously, your account is still active. If you don't remember any of that information, contact Megan O'Reilly and she can help you get into the system. Megan will also email you instructions on how to create an account. This is one of those automatically generated emails, so if you don't get the instructions in the next day or so, contact Megan directly and she will be sure that you get them. Please access your accounts as soon as the instructions arrive so that we can be sure there aren't any bugs that need to be worked out. If you have problems accessing your account, contact Megan. Federal computer systems are under constant cyber attack, and PRS seems especially vulnerable to meltdowns since it is one of the systems through which we allow access from outside the federal system. So even though you're able to access electronic versions of the pre-apps you're reviewing online, we suggest that you download them to your computer, tablet, or other storage device. We suggest that you work offline and put your comments into a word processing program. Then, once your review is complete, you can copy and paste your comments into PRS. That way, if there's a system failure, you won't lose anything you might be working on. As I mentioned, you'll be provided with the evaluation criteria and a scoring matrix. SCRI funds several project types: coordinated agricultural projects, standard research and extension projects, and planning projects. The project type is indicated on the first page of the stakeholder relevance statement. It's important to remember that the criteria for CAPS and SREPs is different than the criteria for planning projects, so you want to be sure you're using the appropriate set of criteria. We've mentioned several times about making comments for feedback to the applicants. When making comments, I always tell reviewers to think about it like they were on the other side. What types of things would you find useful to improving your project, and what types of things would turn you off? Applicants are now required to respond to the results of the relevance review when they submit a full application, so having a number of constructive comments gives them something to address. Also, here's a short list of don'ts. If you follow these guidelines, it'll make my life a whole lot easier. Don't make recommendations either about whether a pre-app should be invited to submit a full application or about funding. I've had relevance reviewers comment, this project should definitely be funded, and then the project isn't even invited to submit a full application. You can imagine the irate phone call I had from that one. Don't reference other pre-applications. I've seen comments like, this project's pretty good, but I like so-and-so's better. In addition to being a breach of confidentiality, it's not very useful to the applicant. And don't be modest. I've had reviewers say things like, the science in this is way above my head. First, we're not asking you to review the science. You all are experts on whether projects are potentially useful to your industry. And second, once an applicant sees something like that, they ignore everything else. Don't include your name. This may seem obvious, but every year I have reviewers do this. What are the outcomes of the relevance review process? I go through each panel and create a spreadsheet that has the scores from each of the reviewers. We create an average score for each pre-application and then sort them from highest to lowest. During the webinar, the spreadsheet is shown on the screen and we look for natural breaks in the scoring. If such a break exists, the panel manager will suggest which pre-apps might be discussed for invitation to submit a full application. Everyone is given a chance to weigh in, and a consensus is reached on which applications move forward to the next phase. Once that decision is made, there is a general discussion of those being invited, and then the panel is asked to create a ranking. We do this by having each reviewer assign a number to each of the pre-apps that is being invited. Those ranks are recorded in the spreadsheet. We use the number 1 to indicate the project that is most important and go down the list as far as needed. We then create an average rank and sort from lowest to highest. The relevance review does impact the development of funding recommendations. Once full applications are received, they are reviewed for scientific merit by a panel of experts in the various fields represented by the projects. That can range from food safety issues to the development of a novel crop. Full applications with all the intending forms and appendices are several hundred pages in length. The merit review process is much the same as the relevance review process. Reviewers rate each application for scientific merit. A panel meeting is convened and each application is discussed. The panel reaches a consensus on the merit of the application and puts it into a category. Those categories are excellent, very good, good, fair, and poor. Once that is accomplished, the results of the relevance review are shared with the merit panelists, and those results are combined with the results of the merit review and a funding recommendation is developed. Full applications are ranked, and we start funding at the top and go down the list as far as the funding lasts. With that, we're done. If you have questions, please email me at tbewick@nifa.usda.gov. Thank you.